Nobody warned Emily that one decision could cage her forever. Not a friend, not a family member, no one. They warned her about heartbreak, about lies, about love gone wrong, but never about blackmail. It all started on a rainy Thursday evening, the kind of rain that made the city lights shimmer in streaks of gold and silver, the kind that makes you wish you'd stayed home with a cup of coffee instead of heading into the storm. Emily had a meeting, a routine contract negotiation she barely expected to last an hour. It was just another day, she thought. But by the time she left that office, everything she thought she knew about her life had been stripped away. Alexander Kane, billionaire, philanthropist, enigma, a man whose reputation preceded him in whispers, in stories, in rumors of power and danger, and now he had chosen her. "You're going to marry me," he said, his voice calm, measured, almost casual, "or everything you've worked for disappears." Emily laughed, nervously. It had to be a joke. Surely this was some kind of twisted test, some bad movie scene she had accidentally walked into. But the moment his eyes met hers, she knew the joke was on her. His gaze was precise, polished, and terrifying, the kind of look that measured every fear, every hesitation, and made it clear there was no escape. 24 hours. That was all she had to decide. Marry him or lose her freedom forever. The next day was a blur of fear, confusion, and the cold realization that Alexander Kane's presence was everywhere. Emails intercepted, bank accounts frozen, friends suddenly distant, whispering warnings. Even her apartment, her safe space, felt under surveillance. It wasn't about love, she realized. It was about control. Her first test came silently. Overnight, her savings account was frozen. A subtle, wordless message. Resistance was futile. At a dinner he hosted, Kane smiled politely, casually reminding her, "Remember, Emily, you agreed." She wanted to run, but where could she go? The world had shrunk to Kane's reach. Every moment, every step reminded her she was trapped. Yet, a spark of defiance flickered inside her. She refused to bow quietly. Emily refused to surrender entirely. She called friends, hired private investigators, and tried to fortify her digital life, but Kane always anticipated her moves. Every ally she found was compromised, intimidated, or unwilling to risk their own safety. Kane's reach was omnipotent. But she noticed cracks in his armor, fleeting moments when his calculated calm slipped, a lingering glance, a voice slightly off, gestures that betrayed thought. One evening, in the quiet of his penthouse, she confronted him. "Why me?" she demanded, trembling, her hand shaking as she leaned against the cold marble countertop. "Why choose me for this manipulation?" Alexander leaned back, calm as ever, a shadow of a smirk on his lips. "Because you're smart enough to see the truth and weak enough to follow it. That combination is rare." Her anger flared. Fear kept her grounded. Every smile, every word, every gesture was measured against his plan. Yet amid the darkness, fleeting moments of humanity surfaced. He saved her from a car accident, a deliberate, calculated act, left small personal gifts, tiny reminders that he was more than the villain she feared, dangerous, but human. Then came the ultimatum. Not the marriage yet, that came later. The contract. Sign it, marry him, and live a life of wealth and luxury, but never move without his approval. Refuse, and every shred of independence she had would vanish. Tears blurred her vision. Anger, fear, and the desire to survive collided inside her. She realized she wasn't just fighting to protect her career or reputation anymore. She was fighting for her life. Kane didn't just want a bride, he wanted control over her very soul. Emily's rebellion began quietly. She pretended compliance while secretly gathering evidence, allies, and leverage. Every nod, every polite smile, every gesture of submission was a carefully crafted act. Her first major breakthrough came when she discovered the hidden ledger, a carefully encrypted document containing records of Kane's illicit dealings. Every line, every number, a weapon. But one wrong move could ruin her. The charity gala was her testing ground, surrounded by elites, cameras flashing, champagne in golden glasses. Emily moved carefully, whispered hints to the right people, subtle gestures, implanted seeds of doubt. Kane's eyes followed her every move, calculating, precise. But she held her nerve. Later, Alexander confronted her privately. "You're clever," he said, voice low, a flicker of respect in his eyes. "Maybe too clever." Emily realized Kane wasn't just a tyrant, he was a man haunted by loss, by regret, by obsession. That revelation complicated everything. She had to balance fear in strategy, trust, and deception. Her rebellion escalated. Carefully, she turned small victories into a psychological game, manipulating his perception of her. Kane had underestimated her, and that would become his first mistake. Everything came to a head at Kane's 50th birthday gala. The city's elite were present, cameras flashing, champagne poured, laughter echoed in a glittering ballroom. Emily had her choice: submit or fight for her freedom. With meticulous timing, she revealed the ledger to the press. Gasps echoed around the room. Kane's calm composure faltered for the first time in public. The world she had once feared had shifted. "You were always clever," he whispered privately later, a shadow of admiration in his eyes. "Maybe too clever." Emily was no longer afraid. She had outmaneuvered him, not with anger, not with fear, but with intelligence, courage, and strategy. In the aftermath, Kane vanished from public life, leaving Emily with the freedom she had almost lost. But some shadows, she knew, never truly disappeared. Stepping into the dawn, the city awakening around her, she felt the weight of survival and the thrill of liberation. Every step reminded her she had fought, endured, and finally reclaimed herself. Somewhere, deep in the shadows, Kane watched. But Emily didn't look back. She had survived, and the story, though far from over, was hers to tell. Even after Kane vanished from public view, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that he was still watching. She had won the battle, yes, but the war felt far from over. Her mornings became cautious. Every knock at the door, every unexpected email made her heart race. She installed new security measures, but even that didn't quiet the sense of being hunted. Kane had always been 2 steps ahead, and she knew better than to believe his disappearance meant safety. Then came the first sign that he was still in control, in ways she hadn't anticipated. A package arrived at her apartment one gray morning. No return address. Inside, a single black envelope. Emily's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a photo of her, taken just hours before, leaving her office. A single note accompanied it. "You may be free from the world, but never from me." Her stomach turned. Fear, anger, and a strange, twisted fascination surged through her. Kane had always been clever, and even in retreat, he reminded her that he still held power. That night, Emily poured herself a glass of wine and stared out the window at the city lights. She couldn't help but think about the man behind the mask of wealth and power, the man who had trapped her, terrified her, and yet, in some ways, taught her what it meant to fight for herself. Her mind wandered back to the moments during the gala, his cracks in composure, the subtle respect in his voice. She realized something terrifying. Kane had underestimated her, but now she understood him.
and understanding him could be as dangerous as it was empowering. Emily knew she had two choices. She could continue to hide, live cautiously, always looking over her shoulder, or she could finish what she had started. The decision became clear the next day. She began her investigation again, not just for leverage, but to finally uncover the full truth about Kane's empire, his secrets, and the people he had manipulated over the years. It was dangerous work. Every step required patience, cunning, and courage. She had to infiltrate circles of power she had never imagined entering, gather evidence without alerting him, and form alliances with people who had been too afraid to act before. Weeks passed. Emily became a ghost in the city she once called home. She learned to move silently, to speak in careful whispers, to let the world believe she was just another socialite recovering from scandal. All the while, Kane's shadow loomed unseen, but undeniable. Then came the breakthrough. She discovered a hidden account, financial transactions, offshore companies, and coded messages that exposed Kane's manipulation of not just her life, but countless others. Every revelation was a weapon, a key to finally taking control. And that was when she made the boldest move yet. Emily arranged a meeting, not in public, not in her office, somewhere neutral, somewhere she could control. Kane arrived, as expected, impeccably dressed, calm, dangerous. His presence alone made her pulse quicken. "You've been busy," he said, his voice smooth, a subtle warning in every syllable. "I've learned," Emily replied evenly, meeting his gaze. "And now, I understand you fully." For the first time, Kane's mask faltered. He studied her carefully, measuring her strength, her resolve. And then he smiled, a dangerous, calculating smile. "Then perhaps the game is finally getting interesting," he murmured. Emily knew the confrontation was far from over, but this time she wasn't afraid. Not of him, not of the empire he had built. She had survived every trap, outmaneuvered every threat, and learned the truth about power, fear, and courage. And as they stared at each other in that quiet, tension-filled room, one thought echoed through her mind. Kane may have started the game, but Emily was ending it on her terms. Emily had spent weeks preparing, gathering every piece of evidence, every ally she could trust, every shred of knowledge about Kane's empire. She had to be careful. One wrong step, one careless move, and everything she had fought for would vanish. The night she decided to confront him, the city was wrapped in a foggy drizzle, the kind of night where shadows cling to every corner and the streets glisten like liquid silver. Emily's pulse raced, but her steps were steady. She carried only what she needed, a folder containing all the proof and the resolve to finally end the game. Kane was waiting in his private office, high above the city skyline. The room was dimly lit, a single lamp casting long shadows across the polished surfaces. He didn't rise when she entered. He simply sat, his fingers steepled, his eyes sharp. "You've grown bold," his voice smooth, almost amused. "Bold," she corrected, "and I've had enough of desperation, enough of your games." For a moment, silence hung heavy between them, the kind of silence that makes the air feel thick, like something could snap at any moment. Then, Kane leaned forward, a subtle smile curving his lips. "I've watched you, Emily. You're clever, resourceful, but do you really think you can take me down? You're just one person against everything I control." Emily opened the folder slowly, letting the papers fall into his view. "I don't have to take you down alone," she said calmly. "I have proof, witnesses, financial records, everything you've tried to hide, and the world is ready to see it." Kane's smile faltered just slightly. His eyes narrowed, calculating, trying to measure her confidence. "You think exposing me will free you?" he asked. Emily shook her head. "No, freeing me starts with me. And this," she tapped the folder, "is just a reminder that I'm not afraid anymore." The tension was unbearable. For a moment, it seemed as if the room itself was holding its breath. Kane rose slowly, towering over her, but she didn't flinch. "You've learned a dangerous lesson," he murmured. "Power can corrupt, but courage can destroy even the strongest empire." Emily's heart pounded. Every nerve in her body screamed fear, but she refused to back down. "And I've learned one more thing," she said. "No one owns me. Not you, not anyone." Kane stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. "Very well," he said quietly. "Perhaps it's time to end this."
For the next few hours, they engaged in a battle of wits, strategy, and psychology. Kane tried to intimidate, to manipulate, to remind her of every power he still held. Emily countered with evidence, alliances, and the sheer force of her will. Every move, every word was a careful step in the dance they had been playing since that first day. By the end of the night, Kane sat back in his chair, the fight in his eyes replaced by something else, a grudging respect. Emily realized that she had done it. She had survived. She had outmaneuvered a man who had controlled lives, destroyed reputations, and dominated every room he entered. "Maybe you were the only one who could teach me a lesson," Kane said finally, voice low, almost reverent. Emily didn't reply. She simply turned and walked toward the door, leaving the folder and the power it contained on his desk. She didn't need to gloat. She didn't need to prove anything more. She was free. Stepping out into the cool night air, Emily felt the city around her waking, alive, indifferent. She breathed deeply, feeling every ounce of fear and tension fall away. For the first time in weeks, she smiled, not because she had won, but because she had survived, because she had claimed her life back. Somewhere in the shadows, Kane watched her leave, but Emily didn't look back. She didn't need to. The story that had once controlled her, threatened her, and hunted her was finally hers to end. And as the dawn broke over the city skyline, Emily understood something she had learned the hard way. Power can control people, wealth can intimidate, and fear can paralyze. But courage can set a person free. The game was over. She had played it well. And though the future remained uncertain, one thing was clear. Emily would never again be anyone's pawn. Not now. Not ever. Emily thought she was free. She walked through the city streets, letting the early morning breeze wash over her, feeling alive in a way she hadn't for weeks. But freedom, she soon realized, came with its own dangers. The very next morning, she received an unknown number. Hesitant, she answered. "Good morning, Emily," a voice purred. "I hope you slept well." Her stomach dropped. Alexander Kane. She had thought he had retreated, that he had vanished after their confrontation, but the calm in his voice told her he had never really gone. "What do you want?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Only to remind you," he said smoothly, "that the world is bigger than you think, and sometimes freedom comes at a price." Emily hung up, heart racing. He wasn't threatening her, not exactly, but the message was clear. Kane was still in control of the shadows, and she had just stepped into a game that was far from over. Over the next few days, Emily noticed subtle signs of his presence everywhere. a taxi that seemed to follow her, emails that arrived just as she had thought they'd deleted them, mysterious figures at her favorite cafe. Kane was testing her, observing her, waiting. Yet Emily also realized something. She had changed. The fear that had once dominated her life was gone. She moved with purpose, spoke with authority, and for the first time felt the thrill of being alive on her own terms. Then came the next challenge. Kane's empire wasn't just numbers and contracts, it was people. Loyal, ruthless, and willing to do whatever he commanded. Emily needed allies more than ever. She reached out to those who had once been silenced, those who had suffered under Kane's control. Slowly, carefully, she began building a network of resistance. It wasn't easy. Some were terrified, some betrayed her, but others became her secret weapons. Together, they began to unravel the hidden parts of Kane's world, exposing secrets that even he thought buried. And Kane, of course, noticed. He appeared again in her life, this time in public, at a gala she had no choice but to attend. The moment their eyes met across the room, the air shifted. Everyone else disappeared from her attention. It was just Kane, calm and calculating, and Emily, poised and ready. "You're persistent," he said, later, as if they were alone in the world. "And you, Emily," she replied, her voice steady, "are persistent enough to learn that control isn't everything." For the first time, Kane hesitated. Emily sensed it. The predator, the man who had terrified her for months, was now uncertain, and that uncertainty was her advantage. The game had changed. No longer was Emily simply surviving. Now she was in control, and Kane, rich, powerful, dangerous as he was, would have to reckon with her. But she also knew the truth. Kane would never truly go away. He would linger, always testing, always watching, always a shadow in her life. And Emily realized that was exactly what made her stronger. Because now she didn't just fight for freedom, she fought to define herself on her own terms, and no one, not Kane, not the world, could take that from her. Emily knew that surviving wasn't enough. Kane had shown her how terrifying power could be, and now it was time to turn the tables. She began moving carefully, quietly, infiltrating the corners of his empire that even Kane thought untouchable. The first step was information. She reached out to former associates, accountants, and insiders who had once been silenced by Kane's influence. Many were terrified, some refused to speak, but one by one, pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. She learned about hidden accounts, offshore properties, secret investments, and deals that could ruin countless lives if exposed. And Kane, of course, noticed. It started with subtle warnings, emails sent hours before she expected them, a taxi that seemed to appear wherever she went, mysterious figures at her favorite cafe. Kane was testing her, observing her, waiting.
Emily refused to back down. She became meticulous, calculated, almost ghost-like in her movements. Every phone call was encrypted, every meeting carefully staged, every ally vetted multiple times. She learned to predict Kane's strategies even before he made them. Then came the first major strike. Emily leaked a small but significant piece of information to the press. A minor scandal, nothing that would destroy him completely, but enough to make his associates uneasy. She watched from a distance, his whispers spread across boardrooms and social circles. Kane's empire trembled, just slightly, but it trembled. The next day, she received a call. "Impressive," Kane's voice said, smooth and controlled. "You're clever. Too clever, perhaps. But remember, every move you make has consequences." Emily didn't flinch. "I've learned the consequences," she said, "and I've learned how to survive them. Unlike before, I'm not afraid anymore." For the first time, Kane hesitated. His usual calm, intimidated demeanor cracked just slightly. Emily sensed it. The predator who had hunted her for months was now uncertain.
That uncertainty, small as it was enough to fuel her next moves. Over the next weeks, the chess game escalated. Kane tried to intimidate, to manipulate, to undermine her at every turn. But Emily had allies now, and she had the confidence born from months of surviving his control. She struck carefully, targeting weak points, exposing corruption, and winning over people who had once feared him. Every move was a test, for her, for Kane, and for the empire he had built. And Emily realized something. Kane's power was enormous, yes, but it was built on fear. Once fear was gone, so was his control. The final confrontation was inevitable. It happened in a skyscraper boardroom, high above the city lights. Kane was waiting, calm, precise, but Emily could see the tension beneath the surface. His empire had been shaken, and he knew it. "You've grown strong," he said, voice low, almost admiring. Perhaps too strong. Emily's eyes met his. "I've grown free, and freedom isn't yours to take."
The city was quiet that night, the kind of silence that makes every footstep echo like a warning. Emily knew Kane would respond. He always did. He was patient, cunning, and relentless. But she was ready. Her plan was precise. She had gathered every ally she could trust, documented every secret, and mapped out every weak point in Kane's empire. Tonight, she would confront him, not just as a survivor, but as someone who had taken control. The meeting was set in a private skyscraper suite, neutral ground. Kane arrived as expected, flawless in appearance, his calm demeanor hiding the storm beneath. He didn't rise when she entered. Instead, he gestured for her to sit. "You've grown bold," he said smoothly. "Perhaps too bold." Emily met his gaze without flinching. "I've learned something you should have learned a long time ago. No one owns me. Not you, not your empire, not fear." Kane's eyes flickered, a subtle acknowledgement that she had changed. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You think you can take everything from me, my control, my empire, my power?" "I'm not taking it," Emily replied calmly. "I'm exposing it to the world, to everyone who suffered because of you. You built your empire on fear. That fear ends tonight." For a tense moment, neither spoke. The silence was thick, charged. Then Kane moved, fast, precise, a test of her courage. "You've underestimated me before, but not now, not tonight." Emily didn't falter. She laid out the evidence she had collected. Financial documents, witness statements, proof of corruption and manipulation. Each piece hit like a hammer against the foundation of his carefully controlled world. Kane tried to counter, to manipulate, to strike with psychological precision, but Emily was prepared. Every threat, every intimidation, every subtle move had been anticipated. She parried, responded, and slowly turned the game against him. Then came the unexpected. Kane revealed a secret Emily hadn't anticipated. Someone close to her had been compromised. The revelation hit like a punch to the chest, shaking her confidence for a heartbeat. But she steadied herself, realizing that Kane's attempts to manipulate her emotions were just another move in the game. "You can't win this," Kane said, his voice low and dangerous. "You're alone in this fight." Emily's response was quiet, unwavering. "I'm not alone. I have truth, I have courage, and I have the will to survive, and that is stronger than fear." The final moments were a tense, psychological battle. Kane tried to intimidate, to regain control, but Emily remained composed. Piece by piece, she dismantled the power he had once held over her, leaving him exposed, vulnerable,
and finally, human. By the end of the night, Kane stepped back, his composure broken for the first time in months. "Perhaps you truly are dangerous," he admitted, almost with respect. Emily stood, calm, victorious, not with gloating, not with arrogance, but with the quiet strength of someone who had faced the impossible and survived. She left the suite, stepping into the night with the city sprawling beneath her, alive, vibrant, and finally, hers. Somewhere, Kane watched from the shadows, but this time, Emily didn't look back. She had claimed her freedom, her power, and her life. She had turned the hunter into the hunted, the puppet master into a man who finally understood that fear could no longer control her. And as the first light of dawn broke over the skyline, Emily realized something profound. Survival had taught her courage, fear had taught her strategy, and power, true power, was never about control over others. It was control over oneself.
The game was over, but Emily knew deep down that life would always have challenges, threats, and battles. And now she was ready for all of them. Not afraid, not controlled, just free. If you enjoyed this story, like, comment, share, and subscribe to Golden Billionaire Stories, where every tale drips with luxury, power, and passion. Because here, love always comes with a price.